What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the Neighborhood Podcast. I'm one of the hosts of the podcast. My name is Kevin Valentin. And in today's segment, we are going to talk about game one of the NBA Finals, but from the Denver Nuggets perspective. So obviously, the game has gone final. The Denver Nuggets win game one, 104-93 against the Miami Heat. And at first, it seemed to be a little bit of a blowout. It kind of got out of hand relatively quickly. Miami makes a run in the fourth quarter, but it was a little too late for that run. Denver finds a way to step on the jugular, hold that lead, and solidify that game one victory. So, Kyle, I'm going to kick this one to you. Denver does an exceptional job at limiting Miami, finding ways to get into the paint, and just overall dominate the Miami Heat. What are your thoughts as to how Denver has to continue this momentum moving forward in the series?
Well, there's a few different ways that you could look at it. If you want to look at it from an offensive perspective, it seems like to me they have to get a little bit more efficient behind the 3-point line because one of the main takeaways from game one is that the 3-point shots were not falling for either team in this game. Miami was really cold behind the 3-point line, yet they actually outshot Denver in this game behind the 3-point line. Miami shot around 33% behind the 3-point line. Denver shot under 30% from the 3-point line. And we have seen Denver throughout their entire playoff run really be effective behind the 3-point line, especially when Jokić is running the offense. It's because from a defensive perspective, you have to put such an emphasis on him because he's their focal piece to Denver's offense. And if you overextend the help against Jokić, it's going to leave guys open like Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., KCP open for these 3-point shots. Now, fortunately for Miami, Denver just couldn't get into a rhythm behind the 3-point line. Going into game two, I expect an adjustment to be made, not really tactically per se. I think it's just going to come down to Denver knocking down these opportunities in game two that they missed in game one. Because, when you look at Denver and they only hit 8 threes in this game, that there's a lot of room for improvement when it comes to Denver's efficiency behind the 3-point line. And you could say the same for Miami because Miami they weren't knocking down their shots behind the 3-point line either. So honestly, I think both teams are going to try to get more efficient from that perspective, looking at it from an offensive standpoint. And then another point that I could add to Denver, this mostly just has to do with consistency throughout the game itself. Throughout the first three quarters, Denver dominated this game. And I think at one point, Denver's lead almost got up to 25 points. And in a game one situation, you'll love that, especially from a coaching perspective, just because the game becomes a lot more easier to manage. And when you're holding a 25-point lead essentially at home, that's a great formula to work with for the rest of the game. But however, that fourth quarter wasn't their best quarter, speaking specifically with Denver. Miami went on a really good run at the beginning of the fourth quarter. Kev, correct me if I'm wrong. It was an 11-0 run at the beginning of the fourth quarter, correct?
Absolutely, led by Kyle Lowry.
And they got the deficit down to initially, 10 points at one point?
I believe the initial run when they called the timeout, it went from 24 to 13 because it was an 11-point run, and then they eventually cut it down to about 10 points, yeah.
But even despite that, we were talking about this during the game. For me to really get to a point where I thought Miami had a real shot to be all the way back in it was a 7-point deficit. Just because if you knock down a shot on one end, you get a defensive stop on the other end, and then you're able to get another shot on top of it. Now it's potentially a one-possession game. But Miami never got it to that point. And that's credit to Denver, in a sense, being able to reverse the course of what happened in those first couple minutes in the fourth quarter and kind of get the momentum back in their side. And I think overall, that's something that I think the coaching staff is going to pay attention to throughout the next couple of days before game two is played on Sunday. Just a little bit more consistency in the fourth quarter, not allowing Miami to get off to a really hot start in that quarter. But overall, I thought Denver played an exceptional game, like you said, Kev, at the top. They got off to a good start. Aaron Gordon really took over that first quarter for Denver. Jokić really didn't need to score that often early on in the game just because Denver's role players were stepping up pretty solid in this game. Obviously, when we look at Denver, this team is usually led by Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokić. They combined for 53 points in this game. But you look at Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr., and KCP, these guys almost combined for 40 points between the three of them. That's a pretty solid formula as you look at it from a team perspective moving forward. And I think going into game two, like I said, I think they got to fix some things going into the fourth quarter just because I think they got out to a really large lead, took their foot off the pedal. You got to play a full 48 minutes if you're looking at it from that perspective. And I think just improve the 3-point efficiency. I think if they focus on those aspects going into game two, I think they'll do just fine. However, I would expect that Denver's going to get Miami's best shot going into game two, simply just because Miami, from an offensive perspective, did not have their best night. They only scored 93 points. So I imagine that Denver's going to expect a much more aggressive Heat team going into game two. So I wouldn't be surprised that throughout the next couple of days, from a coaching perspective, expect Miami to put the pedal to the metal, drive into the lane, and try to stem the tide that Miami could bring in game two. Because I wouldn't be surprised if Miami tries to get to the free throw line more often, just because Miami only had 2 free throws in this game. I think that's going to be something that Miami could focus on going into game two. And I think that Denver needs to prepare for that, just because there's no way that Miami is going to go back-to-back games, where they're only getting single-digit free throw attempts. That's just simply not going to happen. But overall, Denver's in a very good spot right now, and we'll see whether or not that they can continue it.
I would say for me, I mean, Denver came out swinging. Miami had a couple of spurts throughout the game, but I mean, when we talk about what Denver was able to do outside of their 3-point miscues, they took advantage of the mismatches. Eric Spoelstra came out in this game, and he 100%, I think, made a mistake. He went with a 3-guard matchup of Caleb Martin, Gabe Vincent, and Max Strus. If people paid attention in the Lakers series, the Lakers tried that rotation as well, and it did not bode well. As we all know, they were swept and they were dominated for the majority of that series outside of game 4. I'm looking at this and I'm saying Eric Spoelstra is regarded as one of the better coaches in the NBA, and you still willingly took that gamble knowing that Nikola Jokić, Aaron Gordon, and Michael Porter Jr. are on average 6'9", 6'10". You cannot expect anything to go well, especially offensively, if your players aren't hitting shots on the other end. Aaron Gordon had about 13, 14 points in that first quarter, consistent mismatches. Jimmy Butler tried to guard him, but due to transition, they ended up picking up somebody else. And, usually nine times out of 10, it was Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, Caleb Martin, to which they are all undersized. Then Miami went into that zone. It created a little bit of a problem, but we all know that Nikola Jokić does not necessarily have to be someone that has got to put up 25 to 30 shot attempts. He can be enough of a distraction to where people are going to pick him up inside the paint, and he is going to find the open man. Henceforth, why Nikola had a triple-double, going for 14, 27, and 10. It's what he's known for. It's what he does. He makes everyone around him better. He always makes the freaking best pass possible. And again, when people are having off nights, he is the one that can get them back into that rhythm due to the fact that he can find a way to get them open shots. I will also preview to say that the starters dominated in every way possible. Aaron Gordon ends with 16. Michael Porter had 14. Jamal Murray had 26. Nikola Jokić had 27. Contavious Caldwell-Pope, or Coltavious Caldwell-Pope. I always get his name horrible, so I'm just going to go with KCP.
It's Contavious.
Contavious. It's contagious. Maybe it'll be contagious for me to not say his name right. So anyway, KCP, he's not necessarily known for somebody that has to go out there and score 15, 20 points, but he can when he's hot behind the 3-point line. He only gave 7, but again, he's more known for his 3-and-D kind of presence, so he had a positive plus-minus. We'll take that into consideration. And then Bruce Brown, coming off the bench, also did what he needed to do. We know that he scored 10 points, but we've seen him put up 16, 20 points in that Lakers series. So when you see the starting 5 of the Nuggets do well and their 2-3 bench rotation just put in enough, that's all that matters. And at the end of the day, if the Nuggets can continue this momentum, if they can continue to find a way to make adjustments to Miami's slight changes, because again, outside of that zone in the second half or later in the third quarter, early fourth quarter, Miami continued to run this smaller lineup, and they were inefficient from the 3-point line. So unless Miami runs a different starting lineup, unless they have different rotations, different substitutions, splits in playing time, I don't know. Denver is going to continue to dominate, especially because of their size. If Denver can find a way to hit shots similar to what I said about Miami. They may blow this series wide open. This series could end up being a sweep. I'm not saying that it will. I'm saying that it has the potential to be. Because despite Miami's struggles, they still shot a better three-point percentage than the Denver Nuggets. The Denver Nuggets only shot 29% from the three-point line. If Michael Porter Jr. hits 2 more threes, if Jamal Murray hits a 3, we're talking about upwards of 30 to 36%. We're talking about a blowout here. Again, 3-1, that's 12 points, but just between 2 players hitting a couple extra shots. All I'm saying is, yes, Miami struggled, but so did Denver. And if Miami doesn't make adjustments, this could be a rout throughout the rest of this series. Denver played exceptionally well. Nikola Jokić, of course, is the star, the focal point of this game, but they still have a long way to go. Congratulations on winning game 1. They got 3 more to go.